Alrighty, good afternoon and welcome to the UCEA Google Plus Hangouts on Air. My name is Brian Van Groningen. I'm a graduate research assistant at the UCEA headquarters and a doctoral student at the University of Virginia. I'm here today to interview Gerardo Lopez as part of his candidacy for the UCEA Executive Committee. Today, listeners will be hearing from Dr. Lopez, who is the professor and chair of the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy at the University of Utah. His research interests are in parent involvement, school community relations, immigrant education, and issues of diversity and difference within educational policy. Welcome, Dr. Lopez.
Thank you very much.
Let's begin with the first question. If you'd just please tell us about your background and your scholarship as it relates to leadership preparation and practice.
Well, first of all, before I begin, I really want to thank the nominating committee. I want to thank Michelle Young. I want to thank the PSRs, everyone who's listening in, who's doing their due diligence in making sure that the vetting process is happening in an equitable fashion. And again, my name is Gerardo Lopez. I am the professor and chair at the University of Utah. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, where I worked under the tutelage of Jay Scribner, Pedro Reyes, Jim Shurek, and really had an opportunity to meet and interact with a variety of emerging scholars in the field as doctoral students, including a good number who went on to become critical scholars in the field. And the reason why I mention them is because while I was at the University of Texas, I really was fortunate enough to work on a couple of different research projects. One was the effective border school study, and the other one was the effective migrant school studies. And I think that my involvement in those two particular research endeavors really shaped and fundamentally impacted the work that I do and currently do today. And so you mentioned that that my work is on parent and family involvement and engagement. I also do work on immigration, and I think that that having a chance to be involved in those particular research projects really introduced me to the importance of posing and asking real critical questions of and about how to best serve underrepresented students. I think that the questions that we were posing back then was not, how do you make schools work for all kids, but fundamentally, why aren't schools working for all kids? We weren't asking parents of color to be involved. We were asking what kind of constitutes that terrain of involvement, who defines it, and how does that particular discourse limit how we come to understand what parental involvement is. How does it work to reproduce inequities in society and limit the involvement of marginalized parents? And I think that approach, that criticality, if you will, is what I bring to the table in my present day work. I've always approached my work with that critical frame and that critical lens, and I think that the field traditionally asks and pose questions, about what works and what are the best practices for kids, and how do we manage students, or how do we manage parents and families and teachers. And I really did learn that by asking different questions, it's going to open up a different space to do different kinds of work in the field, and that will ultimately push the field forward. And so I think that particular background really impacts and has direct relationship to how I come to understand issues of leadership preparation and practice in the present day.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Our second question, so you've served for several years as a plenary session representative, or PSR. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us about your engagement in UCEA's governance?
Okay. My engagement with UCEA began in 2002. And that's when I started serving as a UCEA plenum rep. I was the plenum rep for Indiana University. And I served in that capacity until 2009, when I was elected to serve on the executive committee. I served on the executive committee from 2009 to 2011. And while I was as a PSR, I was involved in a number of different initiatives, different key discussions, if you will, surrounding the criteria for UCEA membership, for example. Those were really intense discussions, and it was really a fascinating time to be a PSR, because we wrestled with some really tough issues, LGBTQ issues, HBCU issues, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institution. How do we expand, if you will, the big tent of UCEA to be more inclusive of different membership institutions? And so I think as an executive committee member, when I got onto the executive committee, we struggled with a lot of these, we continue to struggle with a lot of big tent issues as well, and how to stay relevant in the field that's drastically changing, underneath us. And so it was, I think my involvement in an engagement with UCEA governance really provided some real foundational, we wrestled with a lot of foundational issues that I think are representative of the diverse membership that we have in the present day.
So based on that, for our third question then, in what other ways have you been engaged in UCEA outside of those pieces?
Oh my gosh, I've been involved in UCEA. If you count my time as a grad student and as a junior and tenured associate and full professor, it's about 20 years, and I've served and worn many different hats within UCEA. I mentioned that I was on the PSR. I was a PSR. I was on the executive committee. I've been a Jackson Scholars Mentor. I was the interim editor for the Journal of Cases and Ed Leadership when they needed somebody to hold that position until we founded a permanent home. I was the co-editor of the UCEA Review. And I did that when I was co-editor of the Review, as well as the interim editor for the Journal of Cases. I was serving in the capacity as the associate director for publications for UCEA, and so now actually I'm serving as the associate director of graduate student development, where a big part of my work is to oversee the Barbara Jackson Scholars Program. And so I think that, wearing multiple hats within the organizations at multiple different levels have really given me not just a bird's eye view into the organization, but an insider's view as well. So I've seen the organization work from both the inside as well as the outside.
Perfect, thank you. So for our fourth question, discuss with us your scholarship, research projects, teaching, and/or service that you believe can inform the work of UCEA, particularly with the work of the executive committee.
I mean, I think this is a really tough question, because it's like focusing on me, and part of it, I think that there's a particular uneasiness with that. And I think that, just suffice it to say that my belief is that UCEA benefits from the collective scholarship of everyone at the table. And by that, I mean that UCEA needs individuals from different backgrounds. It needs people with different research interests. It needs people with different methodological and epistemological commitments. It needs people who are quantitative. It needs people who are qualitative. It needs people who are mixed methodologists. It needs people who eschew methods altogether, and views of methods as some sort of, will to power or to truth. I think that we need a diversity of opinions and perspectives. Otherwise, the field can't grow, and we as an organization can't grow. So I see my scholarship, that I do, fitting into that framework pretty nicely. And I do work on a number of different issues and from a wide range of critical, perspectives. But if I were to say how does my work influence the work or affect the work of the executive committee, I think my scholarship on immigration and immigrant parents is going to be, if it's not already, a critical issue, not only to the future of our profession, but to the future of our country, if you will. I think that as a country. As a country, we're really struggling. We're at a crossroads from a policy standpoint surrounding issues of immigration. I mean, just look at the GOP and the Democratic debates. I mean, immigration is a hot topic, but But I think that regardless of where people stand on politically on the topic of immigration, we as a field, we have to figure out how to move forward and how to prepare leaders who can work with different constituents, with people, with kids who are, and parents who, who are culturally diverse, who are linguistically diverse, and who come from all walks of life, including immigrants, including children of immigrants, and including refugee populations. So I do think that if that were my my contribution, I think that contribution would be something critical for the future of UCEA.
So our last question then, based on that contribution, do you mind just sharing some reasons why you've chosen to run for the executive committee and what your vision is, similar to what you just discussed, for the future of UCEA?
Well, I think that having sat on, as an executive committee member, and the reasons why, I think I explained why I had to move away from the executive committee after serving 1.5 years in that role. I took on a job in a non-UCEA institution, so I could no longer serve as an executive committee member per the bylaws of UCEA. But having sat in that seat, I can attest that there are some real powerful discussions that are taking place at the executive committee level, and everyone who sits around the table in the executive committee really takes and shares a huge responsibility and ethic on issues that are impacting the organization as a whole, and how to move the organization forward while remaining relevant and being responsible to the profession as well as to the children that we serve. So there are multiple responsibilities that an executive committee member needs to have. And I really want to be a part of that discussion once again, to use my voice to address those issues that are still plaguing this profession. And by those issues, I mean issues of race, issues of immigration, issues of class, issues of gender, issues of sexual orientation, religion, disability. I think that we still need to figure out how to create schools and schooling organizations that work for all children. I think that the field as a whole is still struggling with how to do precisely that. And they're struggling with it despite years of research, despite evidence that consistently tells us that mindsets and attitudes and values and beliefs are important. But clearly, I think it's like one thing to believe that all kids can succeed and say that all kids can succeed and to talk about that within our classes, but it's another thing altogether to convince our future leaders and policymakers as a whole that these kids can actually succeed. So and I think that the evidence is there. The evidence is overwhelming. It tells us that underrepresented kids have the lowest school achievement rates in this country. They have the highest dropout rates in this country. And so despite all our beliefs, despite the fact that we know what works, we're still haven't quite figured out how to implement it, how to transform this into something that can be scaled up and implemented on a national level. And I think that in this current context within education, which is testing obsessed and so focused on standards and test scores and outcomes and productivity and rigor, we often forget to focus on kids and families. We forget to focus on parents. We forget to focus on communities. We forget to focus on those things that prevent kids from being successful in schools, like poverty, things like inequity, things like discrimination, things like bigotry, like racism, injustice, etc. So I think that in this world of accountability, the message that we always get is that these issues don't matter, the issues I just named, that they don't really matter, what really matters is something like, we need stronger instruction or stronger leadership or content mastery or just kind of, this get tough attitude. And in fact, I think that, if you think about the bigger political picture, there's a tremendous backlash against education in this country. And this backlash is kind of targeting teachers, and it's targeting educational leaders, and it's targeting leadership preparation programs. And they're claiming that we're not doing a good job in preparing practitioners for the challenges of the 21st century. And I think that in many respects, they're right. We're not doing a good job. But in my opinion, the challenges that these folks see, that they're fundamentally different than the challenges that I see from my vantage point. I think they're focused on fixing these, test scores and achievement gains, while I'm focused on fixing social inequities and disenfranchised communities and dilapidated school buildings. So it appears that there's different conversations happening about what needs to be done to fix the problem of schools. And so I do think that we need to have a different kind of energy and a different vision for how we can insert ourselves into the national discussion as an organization, so that we can have the kind of impact that we need to have within the field of educational leadership and the field of education as a whole.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time and thoughtful response, Dr. Lopez. This interview will be archived on the UCEA Google page.
Okay.
And listeners can access and hear the interview at any time. We also encourage listeners to post comments and questions on the interview using the UCEA Google Plus page. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for the rest of the interviews on the playlist.